Okay, greetings and welcome. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening, virtually, digitally, to join us for the introduction of our latest music video, Meditation from Thais by the composer Jules Massenet. I wanted to come on live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube behind me here, just to say something about the piece, the production, and hopefully we have a countdown. I think we're about 25 minutes out, so I'm going to make my remarks brief so we can get right to the launch of the video. So we recorded this video on my birth anniversary, October 16th of last year, 2022. I presented a concert titled Viol of the Moors, where I debuted an outstanding violin from the Italian violin master maker violins, Giorgio Grisales, who's based in Cremona, Italy, which is the place where some of the world famous violins of Stradivarius, Guarnerius, that was where Stradivarius was located. And this modern master of violins, Giorgio Grisales, is based in Cremona. He built this violin for me, and I wanted to present this violin in a special concert that I titled Viol of the Moors, which also means something. I don't know if I'll get into that tonight. In the concert, at the concert, we performed several styles of music, pieces of music from Donizetti, and an aria from an opera by Donizetti. We performed a piece by Chopin, his Nocturne in C sharp minor, arranged for violin. We did a movement from the opera Carmen by Georges Bizet. We presented a Polonaise de Concert by Henri Vignansky. I collaborated with several outstanding artists. The aria by Donizetti, I performed with Ariel Puczynski from the Ariel Puczynski Stoll School of Music in Lockport. She came and sang the aria with us. I did a dance piece with Melinda Capelles, who's an outstanding actress, dancer, and creative. And she danced with me on the piece, the introduction in Rondo Capriccioso by the composer Camille Saint-Saëns. The feature of the concert was the Mozart Violin Concerto in A major, Koszul 219, that Mozart himself called the Turkish Concerto. And we presented that piece with the Muhammad School of Music Chamber Orchestra, which was made up of just an entire orchestra full of outstanding artists, musicians, teachers, and creatives throughout Western New York. And for the encore, I wanted to present one of my favorite pieces and one of my signature pieces, the Meditation from Thais. And after reviewing the concert footage and the video, I did pull out several highlights from the concert. It was over 2 hours, the concert. And so I wanted to pull out several highlights, which I'll release in soon, those highlights in a mini concert setting. But the Meditation from Thais touched me particularly because of the hundreds of, probably thousands of times now that I've performed that piece. This particular performance I found very special. And after reviewing the footage with our videographer, Renato Graham, we worked together to take that footage of that particular piece and compile it into a live concert video that we're going to premiere in about 20 minutes. So I wanted to say something about the Thais, something about the concert. The orchestra, when you hear the orchestra tune up at the beginning of the video presentation, we've tuned the orchestra to the tuning note of A4 32 hertz. And so there's something special, something spiritual, something magical about tuning to A432 hertz. Usually when you go to an orchestra concert, the orchestra is tuned to what's called A440 hertz. And some orchestras even tuned to A441, 42, 445, which is really high. But there's an esoteric and a spiritual connection to the tuning of A432. In fact, all music, and since I play classical music, Western classical music, orchestras were tuned to A432 hertz up until around 1914, where they changed the tuning to a higher frequency. But my violin, the violin of Giorgio Grisales, this is one of his violins. This is not the violin that I presented on October 16th. This is another instrument that I have of his, again, an outstanding instrument. And when I was researching the instruments of Stradivarius and Guarnerius, as I was preparing to get this violin, which I got several years ago, and then my new violin from him, I learned that Stradivarius was able to carve, and not only carve the wood of the instrument, but he was able to tune the wood to certain frequencies. So, these very fine, precious instruments like Stradivarius violins, which are worth millions of dollars. And I've played the violins of Stradivarius and Guarnerius. And when I played them, it was as though I could feel 200, 300 years of violinists playing on that instrument, as if it was trapped in that instrument. And when I picked it up to play it, I could feel that energy, that essence. And so I learned that Stradivarius tuned the wood of the instrument to certain frequencies. And when I was playing at the time at 440 hertz, and when I play at Kleinhans Music Hall, which is our symphony hall here in Buffalo, where the Philharmonic plays, those pianos, and they tune to 441, I think even 442. So I have to tune higher to match the instruments there. But when I retuned this violin to 432, it was as if the instrument took on another life. So at every opportunity if I'm putting together an orchestra or piano recital, if I'm able to tune the instruments to 432 hertz, when I do that, it's as if the music comes alive in a new and a special way. So the orchestra is tuned to 432 hertz. And just to give you a brief overview of the piece, Meditation from Thais, which is from an opera titled Thais by the French composer, Jules Massenet. He completed this opera in 1893. And I think the first performances of it were in the early 1900s. But when you think of opera, you think of singing, of course, because operas are completely sung. There are no spoken lines in opera like I'm talking right now. In an opera, everything is sung, from the songs that we sing called arias to even the simple lines like me saying, I would have to sing what I'm saying right now. You'd have to sing that. You couldn't just speak it in your normal voice. That's opera. And then there's costumes, there's props and scenes, and there's, of course, music, and there's dancing. And all of that comes together to present a theatrical presentation. And of course, even if the opera is sung in French or Spanish or Italian or German, even though if you're not fluent in those languages, especially if they're being sung, if you just follow the acting and the music and the props, the costumes, the scenes, you can kind of get an idea of what's happening in the opera, and you can follow along, and it's very entertaining. And I absolutely love opera, along with ballet, which is similar to opera. It's just that there's no singing or spoken lines. Ballet is all dance. I love ballet. And of course, as a classical musician, just the live performance of live instruments. So in this opera, Thais, by Jules Massenet, the opera takes place in ancient Egypt. And there are two main characters, Anatel and Thais. But they're on two contrasting spectrums of their lives. Anatel is a spiritual man. He's a monk, means that, a man who's devoted himself to his spirituality, and taken even a vow of celibacy in that spiritual commitment to connecting with his creator, with God. On the contrast, Thais is a socialite, is a prostitute. And she is very well known in actually high levels of society. This is in the opera, the setting of the opera. She's known as an entertainer, as a socialite, as a prostitute, and she is treated and handled very well in that spectrum. Well, Anatel and Thais have known each other since childhood. In fact, Anatel was in love with Thais from his childhood. And of course, as all of us, we may meet someone in school or whatnot, and then we grow up and we go in different ways and different paths. But that love for Thais was always in his heart. And so he is moving throughout his spiritual journey, preaching and ministering and bringing souls into salvation. And he comes upon a town, a place where Thais is popular. And he meets her again for the first time since their youth. And of course, as a spiritual man, as a monk, now again, so he has a vow of celibacy that he, will remain single. Of course, there's no sexual activity. And even in his heart, the lust for sexual connection is suppressed as a monk. But he sees Thais, his childhood love, for the first time after so many years. But in his discipline, rather than give in to that, latent desire, he wants to bring Thais out of a lifestyle that he feels is, frivolous, is, even corrupting, and bring her into a spiritual path. And of course, Thais is, she's engulfed in what she does. Again, she's paid very well. She's very comfortable. Again, she's at a very high level of society in what she practices. And Anatel, again, in a spiritual disciplined way, tries to encourage her to come out of that lifestyle into a spiritual lifestyle. And though Thais resists, and though the people who are around her, again, she's a socialite, the people who are around her encourage her to, you don't want to give up this lifestyle. At a certain point in the opera, Thais retreats to her home, and she has a prayer or a meditation. This is where meditation from Thais comes in, which is the entr'acte to the second act. And in this prayer and meditation that Thais is in, she agrees that she will give up the lesser life, and approach a spiritual path, the path that Anatel is inviting her to. And at that point, which is really the climax of the opera is a soul coming out of a degenerate lifestyle into a spiritual awakening. It's an awakening. So at this point in the opera, the climax of the opera, the composer Jules Massenet says, rather than have another song, because again, opera is all song. That's all you're going to hear in the opera is people singing. But he said, rather than have another song, he wants to have a violin play a lone solo, accompanied by the orchestra, that will reflect the prayer, the meditation, this is called meditation from Thais, but reflect the spiritual journey from one state to a higher enlightened state. And he's going to have the violin play what the words aren't able to express. It's the song without words. And that piece becomes what's referred to as the meditation from Thais, the meditation of Thais from the opera Thais. And just to bring the opera itself to a close, we have about 10 minutes. When Thais agrees to bring her life in alignment, begin the process of bringing her life into alignment with God, with spirituality, with righteousness, she and Anatole, they embark on a journey. He's going to take her to a convent, which is where nuns, women who are devoted to spirituality and also celibacy, he intends to take her to a convent where the nuns in the convent will help her on the path out of her previous lifestyle into a more righteous lifestyle. And they embark on a journey across the desert. Again, the setting is in Egypt. As they are on the journey, Thais falls ill. And as they finally make it to the convent, Anatole hands her over to the nuns into their charge, into their comfort and their spiritual responsibility. And he returns to his monastery, feeling somewhat fulfilled that he completed his assignment. But later on, as he is in his own prayer room and in his quarters in the monastery, one night he has a dream. And in the dream, he envisions that Thais is ill and that she is on her deathbed. And it's then that Anatole resolves that he will leave his monkery. He will leave the monastery to go return to the convent to retrieve his bride, his love of his life, Thais. He's going to give up his spiritual discipline, not his spiritual discipline in a sense, because you don't give that up, but give up the vow of celibacy that monks have to take, because what was so latent in his heart his entire life as a youth, his love for Thais, now he's realizing that time is running out. And even though the other monks around him try to discourage him that this is not what you want to do and to remain on your path, but he's willing to give all that up for the woman that he's loved his entire life, Thais. And he travels, again, back across, I don't know how far it is, but the point is that he leaves that lifestyle of monkery behind and travels back to the nunnery to retrieve his bride, in the fear that she is near death, and the hopes that he's able to revive her from her deathbed with his love, his commitment that has always been there since his youth, but was being suppressed in his spiritual practice. But now he can't allow any more time to waste. And when he arrives at the nunnery to retrieve his bride, he finds out that she's passed away. And that becomes the tragedy of the opera and the conclusion of the opera, that all that he did to retrieve his bride from the life of degeneracy, from the life of prostitution, from the life of being doing the things that hurt the soul and hurt the body. Living that kind of life takes a toll, not just a spiritual toll, but it's also a physical toll. But all that he did to try to save Thais, in the end, it was too late. And so that's the tragedy of the opera Thais. And out of that tragedy comes, of course, again, there are many songs in the opera. The opera is close to 3 hours of song, but one piece out of the opera becomes the smash hit. The violin solo called Meditation from Thais. And as a violinist, our repertoire, violin literature, we could spend the rest of our lives trying to master the works of Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Mozart, Brahms, Dvorak. All of these, we have catalogs and volumes of works that we have to, accomplish, that we should want to accomplish. And, I performed the Tchaikovsky yesterday. And as I was performing, when I finished, about 5 minutes, when I finished, usually a piece like Tchaikovsky is a really knock 'em out. I mean, it's a banger. It is a physically, spiritually, emotionally exhausting piece. You have fast notes, slow notes, high notes, low notes, 2-3 notes at the same time. There was a critic, and when Tchaikovsky premiered his concerto, a critic in the newspaper wrote, because we had critics back then, just like people criticize today, but in the newspaper back in the 1800s, that was where you were made or broken by the critics. If they loved your work, they wrote down, this is the masterpiece, and the work, your composition exploded. But if the critics wrote something bad, that could tank the piece that you wrote. So a critic wrote, when Tchaikovsky premiered his violin concerto, a critic wrote in the paper the next day that it sounded like the violin had been beaten black and blue. And Tchaikovsky, that broke Tchaikovsky's heart, because this was his masterpiece. And pieces like that usually get shelved and put away, when you get that kind of critique. When Beethoven premiered his violin concerto, the critics wrote it was deemed unplayable, which means it was so technically difficult, people couldn't play it. And the piece was actually shelved for 50 years before someone else picked it up and performed it live again. Then people realized, oh my God, this is the masterpiece. And I performed the Beethoven Violin Concerto, and just to give a little hint, next year will be Muhammad School of Music's 25th anniversary, and I'm planning to perform once again the Beethoven Violin Concerto, the masterpiece of Ludwig van Beethoven. But anyway, so after you perform a real, heavyweight masterpiece like the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, the Beethoven Violin Concerto, then for the encore, the audience wants to hear, you just play all this thunder and lightning, but for the encore, we want to hear you play something that, can you make the violin sing? So a piece like the Meditation from Thais becomes the encore piece, because after you do all those fireworks, no, we want to hear something. Can you make this instrument sing? Can you make the instrument speak? Can you make the instrument weep? Can you make the instrument articulate joy and happiness, that which the words can't speak? Can you make the instrument talk? And so the Meditation from Thais becomes an encore piece, but in any setting, because that is the piece where the violin really has an opportunity to speak. And through the violin, the artist, the one holding the instrument, this instrument is just wood and strings when it's lying in the case. But when the violinist picks it up, it becomes a tool, a medium that we use to speak what's really in our hearts. And so I performed this piece on October 16th of 2022 with the Muhammad School of Music Chamber Orchestra, and as the encore, and it came out, I hope you will enjoy, to be an outstanding rendition. And again, the orchestra is tuned to 432 hertz. I want to thank all of the musicians in the orchestra who performed that concert and whom you will see in the video. I want to thank the videographer and editor, Brother Renato Graham, for taking the time. He told me that someone told him that in my perfectionist state, I'm very picky. And so we spent hours listening and pinpointing everything that needed to be in the right place in the notes, and take this part out, change cameras on a different angle on this. And I'm just very pleased with the outcome of this video. And so I know that they have a countdown going on the site. And so if you used a link to watch this, you can click on that YouTube link. If you want to use my website, which is www.henristar.com. Henri is spelled HENRISTAR, henristar.com. You can click that. There's a link in there that says watch. You can click that link. If you're on Instagram, if you go to my bio page, there's a link in the bio that takes you right to the page. Again, we're about 60 seconds out, but I'm just very excited. And then I'm very excited that, as I shared earlier, next year, spring 2024, will be Muhammad School of Music's 25th anniversary. Can you believe it? 25 years. We are planning an outstanding concert weekend where we will have so much music celebration. There'll be, of course, the Muhammad School of Music Chamber Orchestra. There'll be the Henri Star Orchestra, which is our rock funk orchestra. You'll hear the students of Muhammad School of Music will have guests coming in town, guest artists, guest musicians, students coming back for a reunion. Just an exciting time. I'm just so glad to be here to share this moment with everyone. So if we are almost there, beginning shortly, I want to present the Muhammad School of Music Chamber Orchestra performing the Meditation from Thais by Jules Massenet from our live from our concert October 16th, 2022 at the Buffalo History Museum. Thank you for coming, for joining us for this live introduction, and may God continue to bless and keep all of us. Thank you. Peace.